Scott, were you aware that back early this season that Alex Ovechkin was on a dry spell?
Actually, I had no idea. I didn't really follow the Capitals that much this year.
Yeah, he was on a dry spell. I didn't follow him super closely either, but I was aware that he wasn't scoring to the same record or pace that he always scores at. And I went and did a little bit more digging on it, and he actually was on a 14-game drought with 0 goals.
Wow, that sounds like a typical beer league season for me.
Yeah, that is about right. So he went from November 22nd to December 30th without scoring a goal. This is a guy that could potentially catch Gretzky's goal-scoring record, and he goes a month and a half almost without scoring a single goal.
That's crazy.
So when he was asked about it, he acknowledged the challenge that it kind of put up to him, and he kept it to himself, right? Obviously, it's up to me and what I have to do better to get those shots to go in. That was his quote directly from that. He talked about the importance of getting that first goal to help boost his confidence. And honestly, as we're going to find out a lot in this episode, he kept the belief there because he knew he could do it.
Oh, and that's so important.
It is. It's very important. So what was his ultimate goal? Get the first goal. And it's so silly to hear that coming from a challenger of Gretzky's 894 goals. Even a player like Alex Ovechkin can have a dry spell. It's fantastic to hear.
Hi, I'm Scott Schwertly.
And I'm Dale Dameron.
And we are mental performance coaches at GritBase. And at GritBase, we create customized mental performance strategies to help hockey players just like you become more confident, calm, and mentally tough so they can succeed on and off the ice. And we're also the host of this podcast, The Hockey Combat Mindset, which is all about helping you win the war in your mind so you can become a stronger and more capable hockey player. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
And we're definitely glad to have you here on episode number 3, where we're going to be going over battling the slump. And we're going to have 5 tips to help keep you motivated and keep you at the best and top of your game. And we'll unpack all these on the other side. All right, welcome back. So, when it comes to battling slumps, one of the best examples in recent history that we can talk about is something back in 2019. In January of 2019, the St. Louis Blues had fallen to the bottom of the NHL standings. It was actually on January 3rd. They were in dead last in the league. There's various studies that have shown throughout history that actually teams that are on the outside of the playoffs as of Thanksgiving only have about a 20 to 25% chance of making the playoffs.
That's a crazy stat.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. Like, how long is the NHL season? 82 games, right? And by Thanksgiving, you've probably played maybe 20, 25 of those games.
Yeah.
It is insane to think that only, if you're on the outside of the playoffs at that point, you only have a 20 to 25% chance of getting into the playoffs. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane.
So you have a team like St. Louis who's dead last in the standings, and I'm not saying dead last as in like they're like looking at the bottom of their division. They are dead last in the entire league as of the turn of the year.
Kind of sounds like the Oilers and how they started this year.
It is very, very, very similar to that. So we take that statistic, and as we're going to find out in the story, the Blues kind of blow the statistic out of the water. They end up changing their mindset, and they end up changing goalies. And they end up going on a 30, 10, and 5. That's 30 wins, 10 losses, and 5 overtime losses to finish out the season. And they end up placing 3rd in the Central Division.
Wow. Yeah.
Not even a wild card spot. They end up getting a divisional playoff spot.
That's impressive.
5th in the Western Conference, nonetheless. And they would then ride that same momentum over the Jets, the Stars, and the Sharks to finish out the Western Conference playoffs, and then took it all the way to Game 7 with a victory over the dominant Boston Bruins to win the franchise's first ever Stanley Cup.
Yeah, dang.
It's insane.
I remember this.
It was a great story. And even at me as a Nashville Predators fan, which I hate to admit, success for the St. Louis Blues, it is a fantastic story. So how did the team handle the coming out of the slump and turning everything around? Well, head coach at the time, Craig Berube, echoed a lot of his players in saying that they took it game by game, which is a thing that we hear a lot with players, right? You just take it game by game. I think when teams go down by 3 games to none or something, they would say, hey, we don't have to win 4 games. We have to win 4 games one at a time, right?
Yeah.
So the best quote, though, comes from the Conn Smythe Trophy winner that year, Ryan O'Reilly. He said, quote, "We had some dark times, but we always believed in each other. The bond we created in those tough times really carried us through to the end." I mean, that's a fantastic quote. And one thing I love about it is he's actually acknowledging the negativity that was probably being felt in the room. No one likes being dead last. No one likes being at the bottom of the standings. And I'm sure it was really tough locker room to be in, even with guys that were probably friends, that they respected each other, but it just was a really hard time. So other players on the team, including captain Alex Pietrangelo and Braden Shen, all mentioned that this belief that they had, right? They all believed that they knew they could get out of this slump and that they would get back to the hockey that they could play. They knew they were capable of more, and gosh, I mean, it proves they proved it that they knew how to win a championship.
Yeah, I mean, I know we talk a lot about this on the podcast, but just, I mean, our whole sort of GritBase, or even you can call it the hockey combat continuum, is all about focus, control, and belief. That belief is such that integral part of having a healthy and strong mindset with a sport like hockey. And I love that this Ryan O'Reilly quote, as you read, talks about that they had dark times, but we also believed in each other. So there's obviously that sense of belief that exists. And the other cool part that he mentions is the bond we created in those tough times. And I know that idea of the bond, one of our 5 main points that we're going to unpack for you guys today is the idea of having a support system. Don't want to get into that just yet, but it's a great, that quote is really a great transitional point for a lot of things that we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about self-belief in this podcast, or this episode specifically, but that quote is wrapped up with just some really great gems just by itself, which is cool.
Definitely so. And like we said, not to keep beating it in the bush there, but it's just a fantastic story and something that is very improbable and probably won't be repeated for a very long time. But just a great, experiment to look at how the team stuck together and really believed each other and kept that system going. Yeah.
And on a side note, one thing that makes me really excited, and I don't know, this could totally blow up in my face and for the Leafs Nation out there, but I have not shared this yet on this podcast, but I love the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're one of my favorite teams. So the
first step is to admit. That's the first step to the road to recovery. There's admittance. So that's good. You're doing great.
But the fact that they have Berube for this upcoming season, it's almost like you're taking this sort of white collar team and applying grit, which I know that's kind of his style, and I know that's what he brought to the Blues. They were such a gritty team, and it was fun to watch them make this climb because of that. Just that gritty mindset that they have. So I'll be curious to see. This is either going to work really, really well for the Maple Leafs, or they're going to completely reject it. I just don't see someone like a Mitch Marner buying into this kind of philosophy, but we'll see. I don't know.
No, Mitch Marner might not be there, but either way,
yeah.
you do say well. I think that blue collar players really tune into him and really listen to him. Even this season, we saw the Blues, who started the season off not as bad as they were in 2019, but they were not a playoff team, and they were battling for a playoff spot up until about mid-March. So he kept them in the fight, right?
Yeah,
belief, we're more than what they say we are, and so it will be interesting to see what he carries to Toronto.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I'm excited to see what the result is from that change. Well, awesome. Well, obviously a fantastic story, and it really, again, sort of embodies where we want to take this conversation as we talk about, how to battle through a slump, and as we mentioned earlier, 5 specific ways to actually do that. So the first tip or suggestion that we want to make is, number 1 here, take a break. So if you find yourself in a slump, things aren't going in your direction, things aren't panning out the way that you want them to, then simply take a break. I know for me, my background is from the sport of triathlon, specifically back in 2012, 2013. I really got into wanting to sort of check the Ironman race off my bucket list. And so I found myself training hard, a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean 20 to 25 hours a week. And it was just, getting out there, going to a place to swim, finding a place to bike, going to a trail to run,
All times of the day, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I was even doing sort of these 2-a-days, doing morning sessions, afternoon sessions. My Saturdays were typically, 60, 80, 100-mile bike rides. Sundays, 12-mile runs, 15-mile runs, 20-mile runs. I mean, it was just
swimming in different temperatures, different settings.
Pools, open water. I mean, all that. And it was incredibly fun. I enjoyed it for the time that I was in it. But by the time I finished my second Ironman, so I did 2012 to prove myself that I could do it. I did it again in 2013 to actually then kind of chip away at my time. So again, my life for that 2-year span, and I'm not even talking about the 3-4 years of training building up to it, like where I was trying to get to a, like a sprint distance or an Olympic distance or a half Ironman distance. I did all those things. So really it was kind of like this 5-6 year window of training. But by the end of my second Ironman, after I was competing for time, I was burnt out. Like I needed to take a break. Like I needed to reset my batteries, renew my focus, because it stopped being fun. And ultimately that's why I was doing it. Like I did it because it was an outlet, it was a way to escape, just like hockey is for me now. But
it started becoming a job, in a way, like not like a negative way, but like, or not that jobs are negative, but just you started to probably view it less as I get to do this, as a more of I have to do this.
Yeah, exactly. And don't get me wrong. Like I know there are going to be days that are fun and there's going to be other days where you have to battle through it. But this was a different level of just, like you said, burnout, where it did feel like a job. And, ultimately I had to ask myself the question, like, well, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not training for the Olympics. I'm not trying to make it on any sort of, team or whatever it may be. So ultimately at the end of the day, like, I have to think about like my intrinsic motivation. Like ultimately I was doing it for myself. And that was enough fuel to keep me going, but there really, beyond that, there really wasn't anything. So to some extent I could say I was almost taking it over seriously. And that's where I really, again, had to take a step back and just sort of reassess my motivations and my goals and my objectives and all that. And
so what did you do in order to clear your head on that? How did you change that mindset?
Yeah. I mean, so literally just taking a break and pulling myself away from the sport allowed me to, again, kind of just reset my batteries and reassess my priorities. And ended up, I wish I could say I came back 6 months later, a year later, and all of a sudden just blew away all my times and was this great, amazing triathlete. No, that didn't happen. In fact, I ended up taking a 3-year break, came back in 2016, and just fell back in love with the sport. And from that, actually did get better times. Nice. Being 3 years older.
Well, it probably felt new again.
It did, yeah.
And that helps out a lot.
Yeah, it did. And I really pretty much have the same story with hockey as well. I mean, I did hockey in my late 20s, stepped away from it for about a decade or so, and then came back to it. But right now I'm in the middle of it, and I love it, and it's fun. But sometimes all this to say, I mean, the headline here is, if you're burnt out, if you have nothing left in the tank, sometimes you just got to take a break.
And I feel like that's easy to know when it's your body. We all know that our bodies get burnout, right? You can feel the burnout. You feel the pain. You feel like sometimes you go to work out the next day and you're like, I just don't have it today. But I think a lot of people don't tune into their mind on that part too. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of it. Your brain also needs a break. And your brain clearly needed a break from all that because you were just going into it, basically just going through the motions because you're like, I guess I have to do this. Yeah. But you didn't have to do it. And that was kind of good to be able to step back and see that.
Yeah. And one thing to mention here too, I mean, obviously I am a competitive, or I was a competitive triathlete again, but I wasn't going for anything major. I wasn't trying to, train for the Ironman World Championships or anything like that. But I would, looking back now, again, I took a 3-year break. I feel like that was probably a little bit too long. Obviously, if you're an elite hockey player, if you are constantly competing at that, again, elite level, we're not suggesting to take a 3-year break, but maybe take a month off, maybe take a summer off, and like truly take the summer off. But you know yourself better than anybody else. So take the time that you need to at least get that renewed perspective, reset those batteries. Because sometimes rest can also become sort of resistance and hinder progress. So rest is good to a certain extent. And I really need to stress that point.
I think another important part of that aspect too is, as a player, I would say be upfront and honest with your coach about it too. The worst thing in any kind of athlete or any kind of sport, including hockey, is maybe you try to make the decision before your coach makes it for you. Mm-hmm. If you're in a slump, if you start feeling like you're not putting it all in or you don't have 100% to give, start having those conversations with your coach, your assistant coach, the trainer, whoever that may be, so that way they're aware of it and they can help work with you through it. Because if you don't do that and they just see you start to decline, they're going to make that decision for you.
Yeah.
And it might be more on their terms than it's on your terms.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And your coach wants to hear that too. They want to hear, I mean, if they don't want to hear that, then there's another problem. But most coaches out there that are good coaches want to hear if you're struggling just as much as they want to hear if you're feeling great at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point, not only for hockey, but for life in general. Like, it never hurts for you to over-communicate, to be proactive. Those things are always going to play in your favor. That's
exactly right. So going back to like more of a specific story for like the professional level, going back to those 2019 Blues, the starting goalie for the Blues during that first half of that season that we talked about at the start of the episode was Jake Allen. Jake Allen's actually still playing hockey to this day. I don't know how he's still doing it. He's probably close to 40 at this point. And he's still a great goalie, to be honest. But he wasn't, obviously, as the Blues were playing, it's not necessarily that it all fell on Jake Allen, but he was the starting goalie during most of their slump. On January 7th of 2019, Jordan Binnington, a rookie, took over the net for his first NHL start against the Philadelphia Flyers, and he actually earned a 3-0 shutout in that game. At the time, they were doing it really just to give Jake Allen some much-needed rest. The end of the story, really, though, is that Binnington would actually take over the starting job just as a hot goaltender, but Allen would still play in 13 more games through that stretch run through the rest of the season to help give the Blues that propulsion to the playoffs and into the playoff run as well. So, you know, and sometimes it's not just about taking the break, and you're not going to necessarily, I don't want to say that you're going to lose your starting job, but sometimes it's about like reassessing your role on the team and where you can still contribute on the team as well. And I think a mental break, as we see in hockey, when it comes to goalies, they need that kind of stuff sometimes more than other players.
Yeah, and since we're talking about goaltenders, if I remember correctly, I think Carey Price of the Canadiens is another example of a goaltender that needed to take a break. If my memory serves me correct, I think like in April of 2021, somewhere around there, I know he had to take a break for mental health issues. Mm-hmm. I think he might have even been battling a concussion or something. But yeah, I mean, all of that is testament that even these elite level players, they're listening to their minds, they're listening to their bodies, and they're doing what's best for them in the form of this idea of taking a break.
Yes, definitely. And I believe when he came back, not to say that he wasn't stronger, but he was in the right mindset, and he ended up actually taking the Canadiens to the Stanley Cup final that year, where I believe they lost to the Lightning. I think.
That's right. Yeah, totally forgot about that.
But it was one of those performances where Carey Price, no offense to the rest of the players, but he carried them through those playoffs, so it was great to see.
Or now Dr. Carey Price.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right. Well, so going on to this point number 2, where it's embrace the right drivers. Scott, I think you picked up a copy of, is it Dan Pink's book? Is that right?
Yeah. So this book is one of those, you know, if I think about some of the books that have really changed my life, I'd have to say this is probably in my top 15 or top 20. So in my former life, I've basically founded and have run and operated a presentation agency. And so one of the things that was always sort of top of mind for me was, you know, how do I get my team invested in the culture, invested in the mission, and, you know, how do I keep morale up and so forth? And a lot of those principles about, you know, finding the right drivers or finding those motivational forces, not only does it work great in business, but obviously it works, you know, whether you're a hockey coach or you're a member of a hockey team and you're trying to get yourself motivated, you're trying to get your teammates motivated. But all that to say, the sort of golden nugget from that book, again, it's called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us by Daniel Pink. Kind of the heart and soul of that book is really 3 things: that motivation really is going to be best created and maintained through autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So I'm not going to go through these in crazy detail, but just kind of the quick headline, if you're wondering what in the world is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy is essentially one's desire to have freedom and control over their own work. So if you think about our post-COVID climate that we live in today, if you think about Gen Z specifically, they sort of had this expectation of autonomy. Like they want to be able to work from home. They've been around it. Now, if you think about Generation Alpha, the kids that are watching these older people work, that's going to probably be even reinforced even further. But bottom line is most people today, and if you think about most young hockey players, they're part of Gen Z. They're going to want autonomy. They're going to want the freedom, again, to make their own decisions, and that carries over even to something like hockey. Second part is mastery, which is obviously hockey is a game full of a plethora of opportunities to work on various different things, whether it's your shooting, your stick handling, your skating, your hockey IQ in general. There's a ton of, again, opportunity for mastery. And so when someone is given the opportunity to master a skill, there's a sense of motivation and drive that will sort of emerge from that effort. And then the last thing is purpose. And that sounds pretty straightforward, but it's knowing that there's a greater thing at play that, for the sake of this conversation, if you're listening to this episode, it's because maybe you do have high expectations of yourself. You've got hockey goals. Maybe you want to, get recruited by your favorite college. Maybe you want to get drafted into the NHL. You have a high sense of purpose that this game is serving a bigger mission in your life. So to kind of quickly wrap that up, autonomy, people want freedom. Hockey players want the freedom to do what they need to do. Mastery, obviously, the ability to learn skills. Hockey obviously provides that. And then purpose, that motivation, drive, all of that's going to come when, in this case, an athlete has a sense of purpose.
Yeah, that's huge. And kind of going back to the mastery side of it, you talked about how there's many different avenues that hockey players can master, right? They can master this aspect of the game to this one. One real life example here is where Alex Ovechkin, back to him again. After the 2013-14 season, he faced a lot of criticism for his defensive play. He was, as we all know, Alex Ovechkin, as we talked about earlier, he's known for scoring. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we see scorers who are great and phenomenal scorers, but they don't back check as well, and they don't play the two-way as well. Mm-hmm. So he embraced the right drivers on this, and I think accepted, maybe from his coaches or also himself too, at the same time, that he, in order to become a more complete player, had to improve his defensive game. And also, in the same time, he's a captain on the team, so it needed to improve his leadership skills. It didn't happen overnight. This is something that I think we saw Alex Ovechkin kind of improve over his playing career over those years. And, of course, we saw it come to fruition in 2018 when he finally led the Washington Capitals to their first ever Stanley Cup. So that's, a spot where he played a crucial role on the offense and defensive sides of the puck, which it's great for athletes to reinvent themselves and honestly make themselves a more complete player.
Yeah, kind of almost a mirror of that would be a Connor McDavid, right? Because I know he gets a lot of criticism for the same thing, like his great offensive player, defensive play, not that great. And at the time of this recording, they're getting hammered by the Florida Panthers in the Stanley Cup final.
But I don't think that's because of him, though. Yeah. I think it's just how strong Florida is.
Oh, yeah.
But he's definitely improving, like you said. He's definitely improving his other side of the puck,
yeah,
for sure.
But kind of I guess a great point to jump off there is, but if you look at the Floridas, because they are, if you look at the Florida Panthers, because they are just the way they are put together as far as their lineup. Barkov is actually a great offensive and defensive player.
Yes.
And
he was actually who I was thinking of when I was talking about Ovechkin is just
yeah,
the real complete package.
Yeah.
Is an Alexander Barkov, where he can play just as strong on defense, and then he can also score these fantastic goals that you just don't even know where they come from.
It's amazing to watch. It's another self-professed thing here. I love the Oilers, so it's been heart-wrenching to watch this series, but yes, I mean, Yeah.
If you watch it more from the side of watching the fantastic plays that the Panthers do, you'll enjoy it a lot more. But and I'm not even a Panthers fan, but it's been great to watch just how dominant that team has been on shutting down top players.
Oh yeah,
top end players.
They've been very impressive to watch. So as we wrap up the second point, again, this is really about embracing the right drivers. That at the end of the day, if you are in a slump and you are looking to get out of it, go back to your roots. And the way you can go back to your roots is go back to these three sort of factors of autonomy, mastery, purpose. And if you can do that, if you can sort of refocus yourself around these three ideas, that's going to provide fuel to the fire, which will hopefully ignite you out of that slump and get you onto a path that essentially is just a healthier pathway for you.
Definitely so. That actually leads really well into our third point, which is set meaningful goals. And when we talk about setting goals, we're all about finding motivation here, right? You're in a slump. You may not be feeling the love for what you're doing, whether that be hockey or training for a triathlon. You may not be feeling the love that you felt when you were young, or even what you maybe felt the year before. It's important to ensure that the goals that you set, though, for you are also meaningful to you, right? You don't want to just set goals, just say, oh, okay, I'm not scoring right now. I got to score 30 goals. That's what I got to do. Well, that's great to have that as like like something to aspire to, but you need to also have smaller goals that are kind of meaningful to you in the process too, that are actually going to change your mindset. You want to set goals that align with your personal values, aspirations, your passions. Like you don't want to just improve your slap shot. You want to make it maybe focus on just being a better offensive player altogether. Because as we all know, watching hockey, it's not about how good your slap shot is. It's also about where you take your slap shot and the timing of when you take it. So it's important to kind of, just improve your overall game as opposed to just focusing on just one simple aspect. So it's really good that you want to make sure that you have these objectives set and that they are obtainable, and that you want to make sure that when you're trying to contribute to the achievement of these goals, you want to rely on your habits, your rituals, your routines that you're developing on a day-to-day basis for sure.
Yeah, and kind of my own little soapbox on this. In fact, I actually did a reel about this earlier in the week. And by the way, if you want to follow our reels, just check us out on Instagram at GritBase Hockey. That's our username. But one of my big things with goals is, one, it's great to have a meaningful goal. Like, you do need to be setting goals to begin with. But beyond that, it really needs to be broken down into three sort of key components, and that's outcome, performance, and process goals. So outcome being, what is that big picture goal? Do you want to be drafted into the NHL? Great. Okay, so that's your outcome goal. Below that is the performance goal. So what do you need to do in the short term? What specific performance things do you need to be working on, again, stick handling, shooting, skating, etc., that are going to ultimately contribute towards that outcome goal. So a short-term goal could be, work on your stick handling, your shooting, etc., become the highest point scorer on your team this upcoming season. Okay, great. That's a great performance goal, which contributes to the outcome goal. And then below that, you have the process goals. So that's the little daily deposits you do every single day. So going to the gym, eating right, working on your stick handling, working on your shooting, getting, ice time and actually time in your skates. Those critical process things will allow you to accomplish the performance things. And if you can do the performance things, they'll allow you to accomplish the outcome things or the outcome goals. So yes, at a very high level here, set meaningful goals, make sure that these are things that resonate with your heart. But beyond that, once you figure out what that is, then we would suggest break it down into those three key elements of outcome, performance, and process, and you'll be on the right track.
I have to ask you, since you're talking about it, are you a fan of New Year's resolutions?
Oh, absolutely.
You do love them.
Yes.
Do you have those set goals for your New Year's resolutions? Like, are they broken down in that as well?
Yes. So I don't want to go on a huge tangent, but yes, I definitely have. Every December I create a life plan, and I organize my life in sort of major buckets. So like a career bucket, a finance bucket, a spiritual bucket, and I create kind of the equivalent of outcome goals per each one, and then try to chip away at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need you to create my life plan this coming December. Then that's what it sounds like. So that's good to hear. I've always struggled with New Year's resolutions, not as I don't believe in them, but it's you just get caught up in the generic
Yeah.
part of the New Year's resolution, where it's like, I want to lose weight this year. I want to eat healthy this year. So I like the buckets that you can kind of put these in and make it like a tiered goal list. I like that.
Oh yeah, no, it's been amazingly helpful for me, at least the way I'm structured and wired.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. So, we can look actually with some of this goal setting and kind of like routine setting and making sure you know what you're like shooting for. No pun intended there. We could actually look at Sidney Crosby from the Pittsburgh Penguins. When Crosby was drafted back in the 2000s, he was a pretty complete player, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was young and he was, just needed to gain more experience. But overall, he was a pretty complete player. However, in 2015, he already had a cup under his belt at that point.
Mm-hmm.
2 cup finals, actually, and 1 cup win.
Yeah.
But he had a slow start to the season in 2015. But Crosby, being the competitor and the top-tier athlete that he is, didn't want to just rest on that and say, oh, okay, well, I'll just get it together eventually. He actually set meaningful goals to improve his overall game. So we all know that he's a scorer.
Mm-hmm.
He's a playmaker. He's going to set plays up more than he maybe puts them in, but it's either way, he's putting points on the board. So at the time, he worked closely with then coach Mike Sullivan to really just focus on these key aspects of his performance, such as face-offs, defensive play, making, like we talked about Barkov, making sure that he's more of a two-way player or even more of a depth two-way player than just, I can play both sides of the puck. So with setting those specific goals, it helped Crosby elevate his game. And of course, after 2015, we know that he actually went to, again, back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, this time winning both of them in 2016 and 17. And even to today, as he's getting older, he's still one of the more dominant players, especially on the two-way side, one of the best centers still in the league. So it's something that even after his high draft pick, there was a lot of improvement still to be had, and he acknowledged that, and he focused it by setting his goals.
Yeah. And this is, by the way, everybody, this is a very historic moment because Dale has officially dedicated about a minute and a half to praise Sidney Crosby, which to all of America or to all of the world right here.
Yeah, it's enough to just admit that he's a great player. It's hard enough that I actually had to mention 2017, which we won't get into. But no, either way, it was, respect the game, respect the players. So either way, it's good to see what these top athletes do. Man, I said top athlete again. I'm still just praising him. Gosh, I got to stop. Hey, I think this is a great time to take a break. So we'll see you on the other side for point number 4.
Discover your hockey player type in just 3 minutes. Are you the tenacious bear or perhaps the agile cheetah? Introducing Primal Score, our free assessment to help you unleash your inner beast. It's time to take the limiter off your potential. Claim your edge by taking this fast and free assessment that's designed to help hockey players just like you achieve their full potential. Go to yourprimalscore.com to get your personalized results. Again, that's yourprimalscore.com.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. All right, so we're going to jump right into it. So just a quick recap. What we've talked about so far. We're working our way through battling the slump, 5 tips to finding or igniting motivation. So number 1, we talked about taking a break. 2, we talked about embracing the right drivers. 3, we talked about setting meaningful goals. And we're going to continue our conversation here with number 4, which is all about changing your routine. So I know for me, I know earlier in the episode, we were talking about my days and years of triathlon training. So a lot of that work was done with me doing my workouts in the morning, trying to get those, long swims or those runs in before actually kickstarting my workday. But that was also a time period where I didn't have any kids. And so that flexibility, that freedom, it was much easier to accomplish that and just having energy in general.
Well, before kids, you can sleep whenever you want, right?
Yeah.
After kids, it's not the same.
Yeah. So, but my life is much different now. I've got 3 kids. And so one thing I've learned is, to have flexibility and to be willing to change routines if they need to be changed. And that's exactly what I did. So if you look at my life now, most of my workouts are actually done in the afternoon. In this life that I now live. So it's actually very rare for me to actually do a morning workout. In fact, actually, I was proud of myself because today I woke up and did a breakfast open hockey skate. That was fun, but waking up at 5 a.m. practically killed me because I'm not used to doing the morning workouts anymore.
It's definitely brutal.
Yes.
As someone I used to work with back when I was a police officer told me, whether you work night shift or day shift, 4:30 in the morning stinks.
Yeah, I completely agree. I cannot adjust to it. But all this to say, you have to be willing to change your routine if it's necessary. And sometimes even just by simply shaking things up can also spark new levels of energy and motivation. And that's exactly what we're driving towards, right? Because if you find yourself in a slump, it doesn't hurt to change something up. And if it requires changing your routine to find that new sense of drive, then go for it. All the power to you.
It's funny that you mentioned that, if I can jump in here too. Actually, as of like just this week, I've actually changed up my routine a little bit too. And as we're talking about this, it actually just came to my mind that, hey, this is something that I'm doing actively right now. But in a job that I was in previous, a couple years back, it was a very demanding work schedule as far as like length of time. It was very early morning starts and working very late into the evening. And with doing that, with having kids, like you mentioned too, in a family, you don't have a lot of me time. It's really just work. And then you come home and you're a dad right away. And then you're a husband. And then it's basically, before you know it, it's bedtime. And you have to get your rest, right? So for the last couple of years, I've actually been waking up at 4:30 every morning and having some quiet time to myself to just do whatever I want to do. And so with that being said, it's something that I've enjoyed, but as I've found with my new routine, I work now being able to work from home and being out in the field a lot more and in control of my own schedule. I don't actually have to have that a lot or as much as I thought I did. And honestly, as you kind of mentioned before, kind of teasing, it really just comes down to needing sleep. And so this week I've actually started to get back to just sleeping in the mornings. Waking up at a more normal hour of like at least 6 o'clock. And at that point, getting my routine done as far as my workouts and me time kind of spread throughout, either the evening or weekends or, other times of the day. And honestly, it's changed my routine up and I've just had more energy already. And that's not to say what I was doing before was the wrong thing, but it's what I needed at that time. And I think that's what you're getting here too, is that at the time you had the availability to work out early mornings and the energy to do it. And then as you have kids and things change, you kind of find like, oh, it's time for me to change it up because I need to get my energy from somewhere else.
Yeah. No, and I think that's exactly right. And I think an important point to mention that we haven't even touched on yet is I think today, with more of a sort of modern approach to how you manage your life, it's not so much today about time management as it is about, as you just talked about, energy management. That, a lot of people talk about, well, how can I squeeze the most out of my calendar? How can I pack everything into a day and all that? It's really not about that. It's more about how do you manage your energy? And if you can manage your energy effectively, generally you're going to see the fruits of that sort of wise decision making on how you manage your energy. In fact, there's studies that have been done where I know on days where, again, if I go back to my triathlon time period, I know there were days where I was tired and I thought, you know what, I need to go do this 5-mile run, or I could decide to sleep in. And studies have proven that if you are really tired, it's actually more beneficial to your body to sleep than it is to go do that workout. And sometimes doing that workout is actually going to cause more harm than good. And there's something very true to the idea of just listening to your body and, again, managing your energy. But just kind of a side note, wasn't planning on talking about that today, but I think it's important to mention, since you're talking about sleep levels and trying to manage that with, work schedules and so forth.
Definitely so. And I think that's, I don't know, I feel like that's a lot of great information there. So listen to your body, listen to your mind. It's the most powerful thing in your body, and it's going to tell you what you're feeling up to and what what it needs, basically. One thing we can look at during we loved looking at this episode. We've been all about looking at the mid to late 2010s.
Yeah, and all your favorite players.
And all my favorite players. So during the 2015-16 season, Patrick Kane changed his off-ice routine. He wanted to focus more on fitness and nutrition. So he actually worked with a personal trainer. He adjusted his diet, and this helped him to improve his stamina and his performance on the ice. Now, again, kind of like the Sidney Crosby part that we talked about earlier, did Patrick Kane really need to improve that much? I mean, by this point in time, he'd already won 3 cups and was a multiple, finalist for a lot of awards. But again, it's something to keep that consistency in that performance at the highest level when you are already at the highest level. It's great to see that he wasn't satisfied, I guess is the right word, with where he was. So he changed this routine, and it helped contribute to his career best 106-point season, which then earned him the Hart Trophy as NHL's most valuable player that year. So it was great to see that he still had another level to get to.
Yeah. So, obviously that change in routine with the focus on fitness and nutrition obviously paid huge dividends. Nathan MacKinnon is another example, and it wasn't a focus on fitness and nutrition for him, but it was actually a focus on mindset. And I believe it was year 4, year 5. I've got to look up the stats on this, but he was going through a slump, and he actually employed a sports psychologist. And coming off of that, I think it was the very next season, he got back on track to where he was before with scoring lots of goals and doing what he does. So, but that was a change in routine. Having a sports psychologist, having a mental performance coach in his life was not part of his routine, just like maybe having a fitness and nutrition expert wasn't part of Patrick Kane's, regular regimen. So both of those gentlemen's ability to change the routine, do something different, propelled them. In Patrick Kane's case, it just made him better. In Nathan MacKinnon's case, it got him out of a slump.
Yeah. Great to see on both situations that both players are at the top of the game, and they still found a way to even increase that value even more.
Yeah. So both of those guys serve as a great example into our next point, number 5 here, which is developing a support system. As you can see with Patrick Kane, he aligned himself with the fitness and nutrition expert. Nathan MacKinnon, he aligned himself with a sports psychologist. Both of them understand the value in looking for outside support, that you can't necessarily always do this by yourself. And I know earlier in this episode, we talked about Ryan O'Reilly and the team bond that existed with the St. Louis Blues. I've talked about my passion for the Edmonton Oilers.
And the need for a support system because of that, because you are rooting for them right now in the Stanley Cup Finals. So
yes,
sorry, go ahead.
I do need a support group at the moment, that's for sure. But one of the interesting thing to note about the Oilers is if you actually go in their locker room, one of the phrases that's on the wall is fast, hard, supportive. None of us are strong as all of us. And just that message alone radiates pretty loudly that the idea of support or a supportive team culture it really just communicates the importance and the power of that sort of theme or mindset in relation to hockey and putting a team together that, again, this is not something individual. This is a team effort. And beyond that, we also need outside support as well as internal support.
Yeah, and I think on that, you want to lean on your teammates for that support. Like you mentioned, you talk to them, share experiences, work together to overcome challenges. I think if you talk to many coaches in the game, one of the things that they would tell you about leadership in the locker room is that they don't want to have to be dictating the leadership in the locker room. Mm-hmm. That needs to be determined by the players. And we've talked about, I think it was in episode 1, you don't have to have a C or an A on your jersey to be a leader in the locker room. You just have to lead by example, and by doing that is support each other, lean on each other, talk to you. Like if you're going through a hard time, like we talked about, if you don't feel comfortable enough mentioning it to your coach yet, I know there's players on your team that you can mention it to, and they can help maybe challenge you, or they can also help motivate you and get you out of it, because by helping you kind of figure out that, where your value comes from internally and how to access that. Recently, I read a book called The Energy Bus by John Gordon, and basically, quick synopsis on the book is that it's a very quick read, and it's a very enjoyable read because he talks about how he got on this bus. It was a different bus driver than his normal one every single day, and this bus driver brought a lot of energy, and he kind of wanted to turn it into his life experience and how to embrace the joy and pleasure in your journey through life. So through the book, he sets 10 rules to kind of set on the bus, and these are just very specific rules about support systems. And in relation to that, I want to focus on rules number 5 and 6. So rule number 5 states to not waste energy on those who don't want to get on your bus. So these are the people that maybe don't align with you. I'm not saying don't, if they don't have the same values of you, that means you don't talk to them. Obviously we want to still be great teammates, but feed off of those people that feed off of you, right? They get on your bus. They're in the same path as you. They're looking towards the same goal that you want. With a hockey team, it's probably winning a championship, most likely. They share that same vision, and at the same time, you want to make sure that you give them the attention, because they're going to give you positive attention back as well. And then on rule number 6, no energy vampires allowed, right? We don't want to let those that kind of drain our energy out to be around us a lot in our life. Yes, they are unavoidable. Yes, they are everywhere. And honestly, sometimes they could actually be a best friend or a good close friend that you've had with you for a long time, but they're just someone that they might have the great appearance, but they will just drain you of your energy over time. You'll lose that drive. You'll lose that focus. You might start getting into things that start dictating your attention, off to somewhere else, and become like more distractions. So you want to make sure that you don't allow those on your bus. You want to make sure that you have them pushed off to the side. Help maybe support them if you can with your energy and your positivity. But at the same time, like I said, with rule number 5, really, I don't know, just deal with those that want to get on your bus, that have that love and support for you, and let them be along for the ride with you.
Well, there's that famous Jim Rohn statement that I think Jim Rohn talks about this, and I know other experts have talked about it as well, but you can kind of phrase it in a couple different ways. But one way I've heard it phrased is that your salary is the average of the 5 closest people in your life, or you are if you don't want to put salary on it, you are the average of the 5 closest people in your life. That when you think about that inner circle that everybody has, the people that are on your bus, like that matters. And it's, you've got to be very mindful of who's on the bus with you, because you don't want those people to then, you don't want to have the wrong people, like you mentioned, that then gets into rule 6 where they're going to start draining your energy. And I know for me, like coming from a management background, when I look at negative people in the workplace, or in this case, negative people on a team, specifically like a hockey team, you're going to either have what I would call naysayers or toxics. Naysayers generally are always going to be pushing back, challenging, but you can work with them. The toxics, though, not only are they negative, but they actually intentionally bring things down. They are the vampires. Like, I have no patience for the toxics. And a
lot of times the toxics to your face will say they will be yes men, right?
Mm-hmm.
They will agree with you on everything you say.
Yeah.
But then the moment that you're not around is when they bring that toxic energy into the team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a leader, whether you're a coach or a leader in the locker room, that is something to really be on the lookout for, because like you said, you don't have any patience for it. And the reasons that you don't have patience for it is because it can just tear a team apart.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's amazing how one person can impact an entire culture. You could have the healthiest team, but if, again, you got one toxic, they can literally, spread poison across the entire hockey club. So
easily.
Yeah. Well, all great suggestions. I've heard about that book for a long time. I have yet to read it. I definitely need to add that to my list. But all of this entire conversation here, particularly as we're talking about, the importance of developing a support system, it really reminds me, again, Dale, more of your favorite players here today, of Marc-Andre Fleury. But I know when he was replaced by Matt Murray, when he was with the Penguins, obviously that's hard for anyone of his caliber to be sort of demoted or moved. But he was able to kind of develop his support system when migrating over to the Golden Knights. And I know just the team culture, morale, et cetera, that he was able to sort of build there and kind of start from scratch was an integral part of him sort of bouncing back.
For sure. And for the record, I actually don't mind Marc-Andre Fleury. Just has usually played for teams that I don't usually pull for. But with all that being said, I think what Marc-Andre Fleury, and we've seen this with pranks that he's played on players over time, even to this day, I think he played a prank on some of the Pittsburgh Penguins players when he was back visiting Pittsburgh as a visiting player with the Minnesota Wild. He is a well-loved player in the locker room, and I think there's a huge reason for that, right? Is he is the complete opposite of the toxic mindset.
Yeah.
Every locker room he goes into, a lot of goalies out there tend to be a little bit, maybe more to themselves or kind of like, in their own space. Fleury is not that. He is like the social person. And I mean, who doesn't love a good prankster, right?
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, everywhere you've seen him go, from Pittsburgh to Vegas to now Minnesota, I mean, I don't think you'd find a single player in that locker room who doesn't like him.
Yeah. He's one of my favorites. I absolutely adore Fleury. So, it's nice to have sort of that, the type of energy that he brings into any locker room. It's always inspiring and just fun to watch.
Yeah, and kind of like you said, going back to the coming out of slumps, he's that guy you want in the locker room to help get you out of that slump, right? Because he's going to believe in you. He's going to believe in the team. And like we heard from the Blues earlier, that belief is what is going to ultimately lead to the turnaround.
Yeah, definitely. So with all that said, as we begin to sort of wrap up this episode, I mean, obviously battling slumps, they're inevitable. You're never going to have a perfect season. Things are always going to happen. I mean, things change, your body ages, this is a game of, again, managing chaos, again, facing a slump, encountering a slump. It's just one of the things in life, not only in this sport, but really anything, whether it's business or relationships, slumps are going to happen. So again, what do we suggest if you find yourself battling a slump? Well, number one, obviously take some time off. If you need to take a break, if you need to reset your batteries, absolutely do it. I mean, take care of your mental health. Two, embrace the right drivers. We talked briefly about Dan Pink and his book Drive, and the three main sort of takeaways from that being autonomy, mastery, purpose. Again, get back to the roots of why your motivation may be declining, and then focus on these three things, again, of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, to sort of reignite that motivation to help you get past the slump that you may be in. We also spent a few minutes talking about setting meaningful goals. We even took that a step further and talked about, outcome, performance, and process goals as even being more sort of the granular approach to setting meaningful goals. And then we talked about changing your routine, that it's okay to switch things up. We talked about Patrick Kane, Nathan McKinnon, and then we just wrapped up here with developing a support system that sometimes it's okay to get outside support.
And you know who's not in a slump? You and I. We are not in a slump. That is a wrap on episode number 3. We want to thank you all for joining us today, and also don't want to cut the podcast episode off without making sure to remind you to download our Mental Toughness Awareness Guide, where you can learn how to become a more confident and fearless hockey player. How do you get it? Well, all you got to do is simply go to gritbase.com/mental toughness, and that website will get you where you can download your free copy. We are also very active on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Threads, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, everywhere.
Everywhere. We would love to stay connected with you. We post daily about mental performance strategies for hockey players. So how do you find us? Just search for GritBase. That's at GritBase Hockey, and you can follow us on all of those platforms. Also, we would love to hear from you. You can reach us by email as well. It's scott@gritbase.com or dale@gritbase.com. If you have any ideas for topics you want to hear or want to cover, or hear us cover rather on the episodes, we'd love to hear from you and get those ideas as well. Again, from Scott and I both, we just want to thank you so much for the time that you're investing in improving yourself and your game and listening to us at the same time. Have a great week, and we'll see you again next Tuesday.
You have been listening to the Hockey Combat Mindset Podcast with Scott Schwertly and Dale Dameron. New episodes release every Tuesday, so be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a rating, provide a review, or make a topic recommendation for a future episode. Thanks again for tuning in, and join us next week for another episode.